Most people see a man like that standing in the rain outside a gas station, and they cross to the other side of the street. They see leather. They see the kind of arms that have been useful in ways that most arms haven't. They see something to avoid. But on a Thursday evening in October, in the parking lot of a Sunoco on the edge of Harlan, Kentucky, the rain coming down hard enough to turn the gutters white, a 23-year-old named Cassie Pruitt saw something different. She saw a man whose motorcycle had stopped running and who had been standing in the rain for 40 minutes, and who was soaked through to the skin, and who had not asked a single person for help. She saw a man who was too proud to ask. She knew that particular pride. She had grown up with it. So she walked over and offered him the last $7.40 she had on her until payday, the exact fare she needed to get home. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he rode or where he was going or who he was. She only knew that the rain was getting harder and that he had been standing there a long time, and that $7.40 was enough to get a man dry and fed, which was more than it was going to do sitting in her pocket while she watched him through a gas station window. What happened the next morning would change Cassie Pruitt's life in a way she could not have predicted and would not have believed if someone had told her the night before. The Sunoco on Route 421 sat at the south end of Harlan, where the road curved away from the mountain and flattened out before running east toward the Virginia line. It was not the kind of station that people stopped at unless they needed to. The town had better options closer to the center, but the pumps were old enough to still be cheap, and the lights stayed on all night, and the man behind the counter, whose name was Terrence, and who had worked the evening shift for 11 years, knew most of the regulars by first name and their usual by heart. The station had a canopy over the pumps wide enough to shelter 2 cars, and not wide enough to keep the wind-blown rain from reaching the edge of the lot, where a 1987 Harley-Davidson Softail sat with its hazard lights still blinking, running on a battery that was going to die before the rain stopped. The rain had started at 4 in the afternoon and had not let up. October in Harlan comes with that kind of rain, not dramatic, not thunderstorming, just a gray, settled persistence that soaks through everything given enough time. The mountains caught it and held it, and the town filled up with a low mist that made the streetlights look soft and the edges of things uncertain. The man standing beside the Harley was named Decker Malone. He was 48 years old, broad through the chest, with the kind of face that a hard life had organized into something angular and deliberate. The vest he wore had seen enough weather that the rain on it looked less like a crisis and more like a continuation. Iron Valley, MC, Eastern Kentucky. President. He had been riding since he was 17 and had broken down on the side of roads in 6 states and had always managed to handle it himself, which was why he was still standing in the rain rather than going inside to ask Terrence to use the phone. He had a problem with asking. It was the specific weakness of men who had spent too long being the one that other people asked. He had been heading north toward Pikeville for a chapter meeting, 2 hours up, 2 hours back. Nothing he hadn't done 100 times. When the Softail had sputtered and lost power 6 miles south of town and coasted in on whatever was left in the fuel line. He had diagnosed it fast. The fuel pump, probably, or the relay. Not a roadside fix. Not in the rain. He had called his road captain and gotten voicemail. He had texted 2 brothers and gotten nothing back yet. His phone was at 11%. He stood in the rain and waited the way a man waits when he is used to solving his own problems and has temporarily run out of solutions. He was not a man who looked like he needed anything. He looked, if anything, like the kind of man that things happened near rather than to. He was carrying something that the rain didn't touch. 3 weeks ago, his younger brother had called from a number Decker hadn't recognized and said 4 words. "I need your help." And Decker, who had not spoken to his brother in 7 years over a falling out that neither of them had fully navigated back from, had driven 6 hours to Lexington and back in a single day, and had not told anyone where he was going or why. His brother was all right. The situation was handled. But the drive back, alone at night on an empty highway, had opened something up that Decker had kept closed for a long time. And he had been carrying the open feeling ever since, not knowing what to do with it. He was thinking about that when the girl walked over. Before we get to what Cassie did next, and you're going to want to be here when this comes full circle, hit that subscribe button and drop your location in the comments. It doesn't matter where you are. Drop your city, your state, your country, wherever you're watching from tonight. I want to see how far this story travels, and I read every single comment. Now, back to Cassie Pruitt, because what she was about to do had nothing behind it but a good heart and a tired Thursday. And it was going to matter more than she knew. Cassie Pruitt was 23 years old and had been living in Harlan for 2 of them, which was long enough to know where the cheap grocery store was, and short enough that she still sometimes got turned around in the one-way streets downtown. She had moved from Hazard after her mother's second marriage went the way of the first, and she had taken a job as a vet tech at the animal clinic on Cumberland Avenue, and was working toward her associate's degree 2 nights a week at the community college in Middlesboro, fitting the classes around the shifts because there was no other way to fit them. She was not struggling in the dramatic way that gets noticed. She was struggling in the ordinary way that doesn't. The way of counting the days until the 15th, of skipping lunch to make the math work, of knowing exactly which bills could wait 3 days and which ones couldn't. She rented a second-floor apartment on Ivy Street from a property management company called Granger Holdings, which was the kind of name that sounds like a family business and operates like anything but. The apartment was small enough that she could hear the couple upstairs walk from the kitchen to the bathroom, and the heat ran high in the summer and low in the winter, and the hot water took 6 minutes to arrive. But it was hers, and she kept it clean, and she had put up 3 framed prints from a discount store and a small shelf of paperback novels, and it felt like a place she lived rather than a place she stayed. She had a habit her mother had given her. Her mother, for all the rest of it, had this much right, of not walking past people in genuine trouble. Not every kind of trouble. Not the ordinary daily kinds that everyone carries, but the specific trouble of a person standing alone in conditions that would make most people look away. Her mother had called it the basic thing. You do the basic thing. You can't fix everything, but you can always do the basic thing. Cassie had finished her shift at 4:30 and stopped at the Sunoco for a bottle of water and the $7.40 she needed to take the bus home because her car was in the shop for another 3 days and the walk was 4 miles in weather that was making 4 miles into 6. She had paid for the water. She had the bus fare in her hand, 3 ones, 4 quarters, a dime. And she was heading for the door when she looked through the window and saw the man in the rain by the broken-down Harley. She had watched him for 2 or 3 minutes. He hadn't moved. He hadn't asked anyone at the pumps for help. He hadn't gone inside. He had just stood there with a stillness that said he was waiting without any particular expectation of the wait ending well. She thought about the bus. She thought about the 4-mile walk in October rain. She thought about what her mother had said about the basic thing. She pushed through the door and walked over. "Your bike won't start?" she said. He turned and looked at her. His expression was not unfriendly, but it had the careful quality of a man who was recalibrating quickly and quietly. "Fuel pump," he said. "Or the relay?" "You got somebody coming?" "Working on it," he said. Which was not exactly a lie and was not exactly the truth. She looked at him for a moment. Then she opened her hand and held out the bus fare. 3 singles, the quarters, the dime. $7.40 in the rain. The diner on Ivy's got coffee and a counter with a plug, she said. It's 2 blocks. It's dry. This'll get you through the night until you can reach somebody in the morning. He looked at her hand, then at her. He was not the kind of man who accepted things from strangers. She could see that in the pause. She could see him calculating whether to decline with dignity and how exactly to do it. I don't need, he started. I know you don't, she said. I'm not saying you need it. I'm saying take it. There was a silence between them. Just the rain on the canopy roof and the hum of the Sunoco lights. He took the money. Thank you, he said. It came out roughly, the way things come out when a man is not used to saying them. There's a mechanic on Maple named Delbert, she said. He's fair and he opens at 7. She was already turning back toward the station. Stay dry. She went back inside, told Terence she'd changed her mind about the bus, and walked 4 miles home in the rain. She did not think about it again that night. She dried off and made soup and studied for her Tuesday exam and went to bed at 10:15 with her phone plugged in and her alarm set for 5:50, and the rain still going against the window. She was not thinking about the man in the rain when she woke up. She was thinking about the fact that rent was due in 4 days, and that the amount in her account after her last shift's direct deposit was $43 short of what Granger Holdings expected to see by the first of the month. This was not new territory. She had been $43 short before. The difference was that the last time she had been short, she had called the number on the lease agreement and spoken to a man named Roy Pershing, who was the rental manager for Granger Holdings' Eastern Kentucky properties, and who had agreed to a 3-day extension with a tone that made the extension feel like a debt she would be paying interest on indefinitely. She called the number on her lunch break on Friday. Roy Pershing answered on the second ring, the way men answer phones when they have been waiting for a call they already know the content of. Miss Pruitt, he said. Mr. Pershing, she said. I'm calling about this month's rent. I'm going to be short by a small amount. I was hoping, how short, he said. Not a question. Exactly, $43. I'll have it by the 8th. There was a silence on the line that was doing work. The lease is clear about the 1st, he said. I know it is. I'm not asking to break the lease. I'm asking for Granger Holdings doesn't do extensions, Miss Pruitt. I may have bent the policy last time as a personal accommodation, but I can't do it again. If the rent isn't received in full by end of business on the 1st, I'll have to initiate the filing. The filing. The specific words that people in his position used when they wanted to avoid saying the bigger word, which was eviction. Mr. Pershing, she said. I've paid on time 10 out of 12 months. I'm $43 short. The policy is the policy, he said. I'm sorry. He did not sound sorry. He sounded like a man who had said this sentence enough times that it no longer registered as a sentence, just a procedure. She sat with her phone in her hand for a moment after he hung up. Then she put it in her pocket and went back to work. She was still sitting with it on Saturday morning when someone knocked on her door. She was not expecting anyone. She went to the door in her socks and her weekend sweatshirt and opened it without thinking to check first. This was Harlan. This was her building. She had never needed to check. The man in the hallway was not who she expected. He was wearing dry clothes now. Clean jeans, a flannel, the same vest she had seen in the rain on Thursday, and he was carrying a paper bag from the diner on Ivy Street, and he had his helmet under one arm. He looked different dry, still large, still angular. But the deliberateness in his face had something else in it now. something that had not been there in the rain. "How did you find me?" was the first thing she said. "Terrence at the Sunoco knew you," Decker said. "He said you worked at the vet clinic on Cumberland. The woman at the desk there said you had Saturday mornings off." He paused. "I'm sorry for showing up at your door. I wanted to return what you gave me, and I didn't want to do it through a third party." He held out the paper bag. She took it. Inside was a folded envelope and 2 coffees in paper cups with lids on. "The coffee's from the diner," he said. "The envelope is what I owe you." She opened the envelope. It had a $50 bill in it. "This is too much," she said. "It's $7.40 and 42 for the interest," he said. And there it was, the dry version of what she had seen in the rain. The thing underneath the deliberateness, the small impossible humor of a man who had been carrying it quietly for a long time. She looked at him for a moment. "You want to come in?" she said. He came in. He sat at her small kitchen table and drank his coffee, and she sat across from him and drank hers, and they talked the way 2 people talk when they have already established something, and are only now getting around to the words. He told her his name. She told him hers. He told her he had reached his road captain at midnight, that 3 brothers had arrived at 7 in the morning with a trailer, that Delbert on Maple had the Softail up by noon. She told him she was 2 classes from her associate's degree, and that she had a good job, and that her building was managed by people who made her feel, every month, like she was getting away with something she hadn't done. Decker was quiet for a moment. "What's the management company?" she told him. She did not know why she told him the whole thing. The call, with Pershing, the $43. The word that Pershing had used without using it. It was not a thing she would normally have told a stranger. It came out the way things come out sometimes when you have been holding them alone for long enough, and the right person is sitting across the table. He listened without interrupting. He had the quality of a man who knew how to listen, which is a rarer quality than it sounds. When she finished, he nodded once. He looked at his coffee cup for a moment. Then he said, "Do you have the lease agreement?" She got it from the drawer where she kept documents. He read it slowly, the same way he had turned pages in the rain. Roy Pershing was at his desk at 8:40 on Monday morning when his phone rang from a number he didn't recognize. He answered the way he answered all calls, with the particular authority of a man who controlled something that other people needed. "This is Pershing." The voice on the other end was quiet and unhurried. It said that it was calling on behalf of a tenant at the Ivy Street property, and that it had some questions about the lease agreement. "I don't discuss individual tenant situations with the lease," the voice said. "Contains a habitability clause on page 4. Section 7B. The tenant reports that the heating unit has failed 3 times in the past 14 months, and that written maintenance requests were submitted and not responded to within the required 60 days. A pause. There's also a question about the security deposit. The original amount was held at $760. The itemized deduction schedule you sent in August charged for repairs that, per the lease, fall under routine maintenance. Pershing was quiet. "I'm not calling to make a problem," the voice said. "I'm calling to let you know that the rent for this tenant will be received in full on the 1st, as always, and that Granger Holdings might want to take a look at which tenants they're creating problems for, because some of those tenants know people who read lease agreements carefully." Another pause. "Is that something we understand each other about?" Pershing said yes. He said it in one word, which was the only word available. The call lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Pershing sat at his desk for a while after it ended and thought about things he preferred not to think about. Then he picked up the phone and called the maintenance line and arranged for the Ivy Street heating unit to be serviced. Cassie didn't know about the call until 2 weeks later, when Decker told her. She had assumed the rent situation had resolved the way these things sometimes did. That Pershing had looked at the calendar and the account and made a practical decision. She had received, on the morning of the 1st, a brief email from Granger Holdings stating that her account showed a balance of 0 and that the prior month's overage had been applied as a credit. She had stood in her kitchen and read the email 3 times. Decker told her on the second visit he had come back through Harlan 2 Saturdays later on his way to a run in Virginia and had stopped at the diner on Ivy Street and texted her, which meant she had given him her number at some point, which she did not entirely remember doing, but also did not mind. He told her about the call plainly, without ceremony, in the same way he did most things. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "I could have handled it." "You were handling it," he said. "I just helped." She looked at him. "That's what I did," she said. "On Thursday, I just helped." He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, the same single nod as before. "Yeah," he said. "I know." It was not a large conversation. It was the size it needed to be. What happened in the parking lot of the Ivy Street diner at 9:15 on that Saturday morning was what had been building since Thursday in the rain at the Sunoco. 7 motorcycles pulling in from the direction of Route 421, road-worn and easy, the engines dropping down to idle and then cutting out in a row that sounded like a sentence, ending one word at a time. 6 men climbing off their bikes and coming into the diner, the way men come into a place they've been before, even when they haven't. The way people come in when they belong to someone who belongs there. Decker introduced them by first names only. The way brothers get introduced. They took up the back half of the diner and filled it with the smell of cold air and leather and the particular energy of people who spend long hours on roads together, which is its own kind of language. Cassie sat at the counter with her coffee and watched this and thought, this is what he was riding toward and away from, all at once, on that Thursday in the rain. This is what a man carries when he is too proud to ask and too decent to leave a thing unfinished. The waitress refilled her cup without being asked. The morning was clear, the first clear Saturday in 3 weeks, and the light came through the diner windows at the low October angle that makes ordinary things look considered. She thought about $43. She thought about $7.40 in the rain. She thought about what her mother had said about the basic thing. You can't fix everything, but you can always do the basic thing. And about how the basic thing, sometimes, turned out to be the biggest thing. She did not think about Roy Pershing. There was no longer any reason to. Roy Pershing resigned from Granger Holdings the following spring, after a review of lease practices across the company's Eastern Kentucky properties found a pattern of documentation irregularities that the company chose not to publicize. The Ivy Street property was sold to a local owner the following fall, and the new management sent each tenant a letter that used the word neighbor twice in the first paragraph. Cassie Pruitt passed her associate's exam in February. She was full-time at the clinic and enrolled in the bachelor's program by March. Decker Malone came through Harlan 4 more times that year. The 5th time he did not go through Harlan, he stopped in Harlan. There is a difference. He still rode like a man with somewhere to be. He had just started having a reason to stop. The Softail, for the record, ran fine after Delbert replaced the relay. It started on the first try. It had been starting on the first try since November. It was, in the end, the simplest thing in the world. A girl with $7.40 and the good sense to use them. And a man who had never figured out how to ask for help until someone offered it to him in the rain without being asked. 2 people who recognized, in each other, the same particular pride. The kind that comes from holding things together alone for a long time. And who did, each of them, the basic thing? The rest followed the way the rest always follows, one small act at a time, in exactly the right direction. Some people think generosity has to be large to matter, has to be a sacrifice worth announcing. But Cassie Pruitt had $7.40 and a 4-mile walk in the rain waiting for her. And she gave what she had without calculating the return. Because the man by the broken motorcycle was cold and alone, and the rain was not stopping. That's all it was. That's all it ever is. If this story found you tonight, if you believe that the basic thing is always worth doing, even when it costs you the bus ride home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you're here for the next one. And drop a comment below. Have you ever given something you couldn't afford to a stranger? Type basic thing in the comments if this one got to you. I read every single one.